Bleach Rebirth of Souls is the first Bleach game I have played in a very long time. Now, I'm a fan of the anime, never really read the manga, but I am a fan of the anime. I have watched the entire series multiple times, and I am actively watching Thousand Year Blood War. So when Bleach Rebirth of Souls was announced, I was very excited, and I looked forward to playing this game, and Bleach did not disappoint me. I really, really enjoyed Bleach Rebirth of Souls. I had a blast playing this game, and I still actively play it. Mainly because I love the world and I love the way the game plays, but most importantly, I love how this game represents each character and makes each character feel unique. So let's get into it. First and foremost, when you fire up Bleach for the first time, it is recommended that you go through the tutorial. The tutorial is very deep. It explains ins and outs of every aspect of the game that you need to know on how to actively play the game. However, if you go into the game's story mode as well, the story mode also has its own tutorial, so you have the choice of actually doing the main tutorial or the story, depending on how you want to play and whether or not you plan on going to multiplayer first or the story mode first. Now, when it comes to the game's actual story mode, Bleach Rebirth of Souls covers pretty much the first three major arcs of the entire series, with the only two arcs missing being the Fullbring arc and the Thousand Year Blood War arc. Those two arcs are not featured here. This game will take you all the way up to the fall of Aizen, and that's where the story ends for Bleach Rebirth of Souls. Now that is a lot of content. That is a lot of story content, and the game story mode has lots and lots of cutscenes. So if this is your first time ever experiencing the Bleach story, I give credit where credit is due. Bleach Rebirth of Souls, the story mode, does a very good job of telling the story, the actual narrative of Bleach up until the fall of Aizen. So for new people, that is great. For veterans, you can easily just skip the scenes that you want to get to the parts you want because you are familiar with the story. That being said, because it is such a large amount of story content, the story mode has a lot and lot of cutscenes. To put things into perspective, if you don't skip any of the cutscenes, you will take roughly 40-ish hours to beat the entire story mode if you don't skip the cutscenes. And once you're done with that story mode, you even have the secret missions, which are a subset of stories that focus in on side characters. And some of these stories are backstories to some of the characters, while others put the characters into what-if scenarios as what would happen if things were different. And all of that combined would take about roughly 50 or so hours. So there is a lot of single player content for people who want to consume the story of Bleach. Another bit of single player content is you also have the single player missions in the offline mode. These missions are essentially the game's survival mode. 3 difficulties to choose from, and once you start it, you start with one character and you have to run through it all without losing once. And obviously, your health bar will continue from fight to fight, so it's imperative that you finish enemies as quickly as possible while taking as little damage as possible. Other than that, that is it for the single player content. When it comes to multiplayer content, right now you have a basic online mode. There is no ranked mode as of this review. That doesn't mean they won't put one in later, but currently there isn't one. And the online mode itself is basically very basic, where you find a quick match, or you organize a lobby of players and you do your own matches that way. But it's quite basic, and for hardcore fighting fans, you may get bored long term. Now, that being said, another element to Bleach Rebirth of Souls that they have is these things called soul crystals and talismans. Soul crystals are basically crystals that you put on each character individually. These range from a variety of buffs. Buffs such as long as you have maximum Kampanku, which is your life, you gain extra amount of damage increase. And things of that nature. Another one could be defensive based, where you gain the a resistance damage percentage of like 8% of all damage. These things can be applied to each character individually, but when it comes to online play, you have the option to turn them off. Talismans are very similar. However, talismans are single use. So if you're going to do one of the offline missions and run the survival mode, well, a talisman will work for that entire survival mode. If it's just one match of this of a story mission, then guess what? It only lasts for the one mission. They're single-use items that give you single-use boosts. All of these items can be purchased from the Urahara shop, which you earn in-game currency just by playing the game. There is no way to buy currency. There is no monetization of that manner. You can only earn the currency by playing the game. Now, that being said, how is the actual core gameplay of Bleach? What is the core? Well, the core input commands are very casual based, very similar to a lot of like the games more like Dragon Ball Fighter Z, where casual players can just one button combos. It's one button combos and everybody shares the same move set in terms of input commands. So if you want to use Gin's special one move, it's the same button as you would do Ichigo's, or as you would do Stark's, or any other character. The input commands are universal across the board. To use everybody's supers are the same. To use the reversals is the same. To use the combos, they're all the same inputs. So there is a lack of depth in terms of the core gameplay mechanics when you compare it to a game like Street Fighter or Tekken, etc. Now, where the game gets deep is with how the characters play. This is where the shining star of Bleach Rebirth of Souls is. Every character plays unique and plays true to the anime or source material. For example, Soifon, one of her abilities is she can call out her Shikai, which allows for 2-hit kills. It does not matter how much health you have or how many lives you have. She can hit you with her Shikai twice in a single match. You're dead. Period. That's true to her character. Right? Where another character, for example, is Aizen. Aizen is the only character that has 4 different transformations. Because guess what? Source material, Aizen has 4 different transformations. And then this goes across the board. And it's also how certain abilities work. For example, Shinsui, the captain with the pink coat on, his awaken ability is that he activates his Shikai. And his Shikai basically forces children's games. Well, the way Bleach Rebirth of Souls incorporates that is that there's 3 different games that are randomly chosen. One game is you have an area like Domination where you have to sit in it. And if you don't sit in it, your health depletes if you're outside of it. Another one will mark the enemy. Once that counter reaches 0 or takes a certain amount of damage, it detonates, dealing extra damage. So they all work differently. Then you have Renji. Renji, who calls out his Bunkai, he basically has this huge Bunkai that he has that is obviously exactly like it would be in the source material, but yet he gains super armor. And the trick for him is that if he loses all of his health or a certain amount of time has expired, he will lose his Bankai and then become into a weakened state. So every character, while the input commands are the same across the board, based on their kits, they play very, very differently. And the game does have, I believe, 30 or so characters to choose from. The only thing I will say is there are some notable omissions from the character select screen. For example, Baron, who is Espada number 2, for some reason is not present. Yami, who's Espada number 10, for some reason he's not present. And yet, both of these characters are in the game that you can fight against, and they each have their own moveset. So I don't understand why they're not here. And there's more characters throughout the story that are like that are not accessible in the game, but you do fight against them. And it seems like they should be in the game. But overall, the game plays fantastic because of how each character has their own identity. But as I said at the top of the review, this game is very casual friendly, more so than the diehards. Now, while I did have a good time with Bleach Rebirth of Souls, it is not a perfect game. There is issues. The biggest issue I had was performance. Performance was the biggest issue I had at first. The first day I experienced 2 crashes, but then it appears that they have fixed this. I am playing on PC. And even though the crashes, they have addressed them as far as my experience has been, the game still, for what the system requirements are, is not optimized. I mean, the requirements are pretty steep just to get 1080p 60 FPS in a game like this. So there is a lot of work to be done in terms of optimization, and that was something that I made note of. The other thing that also irked me with Bleach Rebirth of Souls was with regards to the story mode itself. While it does tell you a good narrative, the epic moments fail in comparison to what the anime is. For example, when Ichigo first casts his Bunkai in the anime, it's an epic scene. Whereas in the game, the camera just flashes white and then he is in Bunkai state. So it is disappointing in that regard. On top of this, for some reason, they decided to add filler content to the story mode. Specifically with Chapter 3. Chapter 3, they added, for some reason, side things that aren't really important to the story. It's just bloat, and I don't know why they did that. Like the game didn't need these fillers. They don't really pertain to the story. So why this was added on, I don't know. But that's about it in terms of the negatives that I've had with this game. Performance being the biggest one with the crashes and optimization not being up to speed, but also the bloat within the story itself. Other than that, I thoroughly enjoy this game. I have a blast playing it. I like how the characters feel different. I like how, as a casual fighting player myself, I like that I can play this game for a bit and then put it down, go play something else for a while, and then come back and not feel like I lost too much of a step or that I'm too rusty. Whereas when it comes to games like Street Fighter and then the more in-depth fighting games, you have to be committed to actually have like a good chance of winning, just because, yes, it is rewarding skill, but I'm a casual guy, not a diehard. And games like Bleach Rebirth of Souls plays more into me, where I can just pick up and play. I know the story, I know the characters. I may have to review the moveset from time to time to know what button does what, but aside from that, I prefer that it is a casual experience. Overall, I recommend Bleach Rebirth of Souls to anyone who is a Bleach fan. If you are a Bleach fan, this game, in my opinion, is a must-play. If you're not a Bleach fan and you're looking to get into the franchise, this is a good way to do it. And if you're not a Bleach fan but you like fighting games, there is definitely fun to be had. There's lots of content for solo players, but you may get bored long-term due to the lack of depth when it comes to combos and input commands. Overall, I'm giving Bleach Rebirth of Souls an 8.5 out of 10. This is Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.